Hey guys, a few days ago I released a video on the Google Maps API and a lot of you guys really liked that and you gave me some good feedback. So what I'm going to do now is go over the geocoding API, which allows us to basically take an address, like a street address, and then send a request to the API and then get back the latitude and longitude, the country, the county, basically all of any address info or any location info associated with that address. Alright, so that's what we'll be doing in this video. Let's get started. This video is sponsored by Dev Mountain. If you're interested in learning web development, iOS, or UX design, Dev Mountain is a 12-week design and development bootcamp intended to get you a full-time job in the industry. To learn more, visit devmountain.com or click the link in the description below. Alright, so the setup for this video is going to be similar to the Google Maps API video. We need to register an API key so that we can make requests. Okay, so this is the documentation for geocoding. And if we look right here, this is the URL that we need to make the request to. So it's maps API geocode/JSON, and then you'll see there's an address parameter. And in this case, you're looking up 1600 Amphitheater Parkway, Mountain View, California, and then you need to attach your API key. So let's go ahead and create that first. So you need to go to console.developers.google.com and you need to have a project. I already have one called test project and I have that selected. And then I'm going to say enable API, and we're going to want to go to Google Maps APIs and then click more, and you'll see that there's a geocoding API. So we want to click on that, and then we just want to enable it. And then once we do that, we should be able to get our credentials. So let's say create credentials, and we want to, let's click that, and then it should give us an API key right here. So we're going to click done, and then we have that in our console. We can come back to that at any time. So as far as our project setup, all you're going to need is one HTML file. So I have a folder called my geocode with one file called index.html. So I'm going to open that up. And I'm using Atom for my text editor. You can use whatever you want. I'm also using Emmet, and let me just go to settings to show you if you want to install that. Emmet kind of makes things easier as far as HTML tags. If you want, you can just search for Emmet and click packages, and that should come up. This first one, you just want to install that. I'm also going to be using Atom Live Server. So let's search for Atom Live Server and click packages, and it's this one here by Jazz Chen. Okay, and that's just going to allow us to open that HTML file on our local host on a specific port. Alright, so let's go ahead, and while I have this open, I'm going to go to packages, Atom Live Server. It's actually running. I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to restart it. Alright, and like I said, you don't need to have this. You can just open index.html. Alright, you'll see it's running on my loopback address on my local host. Alright, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to use Emmet to put in some basic HTML structure. So just exclamation tab, and it's going to give us our doc type, our head, body tags, all that stuff. And then in the title, let's just say, we'll say my geocode app. Alright, and then let's see, we're going to want to I'm actually going to open up the documentation again. Let's see, I have a ton of stuff open here. Here we go. Alright, so before we get into our actual project, let's take a look at our response. So if we send a request to this right here, it's going to give us something that looks like this, okay, which is a results array that has an address components array. And if we look in here, we have a bunch of different objects, and each one has a long name, a short name, and then types. Alright, now types is just that. It's the type of component. For instance, this is the street number type, which is also in an array because some have more than one type. Alright, then we have a short name and a long name, and in some cases they're the same. There's no short way to say 1600. So that's the street number. If you look here, we have the route type, which is actually the street name. And then we have this locality, political, this is the city. Okay, they have some really strange names. And if we look here, we have administrative area level 2, which is the county name. I really don't like the way that they respond, the response that comes back, and the types and stuff, but I guess there's a reason for it. Because, you know, some places have regions, some have states, so they can't just say state, all right, because it's not exclusive to the US or somewhere else that has states. And then we also have the formatted address, which is the complete address written out. So even if we said, you know, if we search for just 1600 Amphitheater Parkway, Mountain View, this will come back with the state, with the zip code and the country and all that stuff. All right, then we have geometry, which has the latitude and longitude values. Okay, so we can get all of this info, and then we're going to insert it into our web page. All right, you can also do reverse geocoding, which I'll probably do in another video, where you can actually put the latitude and longitude and then get the city and all that stuff back. Okay. Now, before we get into writing our JavaScript to make the request, I just want to show you an example through something called Postman. So I'm going to just search for Postman Chrome because it is a Chrome extension. I believe it's also for Firefox as well. I already have it installed. Now, you don't have to do this. You can just watch, but if you want, you can download it and just launch it. And what we can do is just grab from the documentation, we'll grab that entire URL here, and then we'll copy that and bring it over to Postman and make sure that this is get, because we want to make a get request, and then we'll paste that in. We're going to need our API key, so we'll grab that and whoops, just go ahead and replace that, and let's say send, and you'll see that we get a response that looks very similar to the documentation response. Formatted address, geometry, address components. So we want to mimic this same thing in our JavaScript. Now, this API is not dedicated to JavaScript. You could use any language or any framework as long as you can make HTTP requests. You could use Django or PHP frameworks, Laravel, anything that you can make a request with. Now, as far as making the request through our application, we're going to use something called Axios. Okay, now you don't have to use this. You could use, you know, standard JavaScript, which is kind of long and drawn out to make an AJAX request. You could use ES6 promises, you could use jQuery, but I think that this is one of the easier ways to do it. Okay, so if we go down here, you can install it with npm, but I don't want to do that. I want to keep this very basic. We're just going to include the script tag, and then we'll be able to say axios.get to make a GET request, put in that URL along with the address, and we'll get a response. And then we can take that response and we can format it so that we can insert it right into our web page. All right, so that's what we'll be doing. So let's grab this script tag right here and go back to our application. And we're just going to paste that in right here. Now I'm also going to use Bootstrap 4. So I'm going to just search for Bootstrap 4 CDN. And if you've never used Bootstrap 4, don't worry about it. We're just using a couple things. We're going to use the list group, which is the same syntax as Bootstrap 3. We're also going to use cards, all right, and then just a simple form. So I'm going to grab the CDN right here and copy that, and then we'll bring that into our application as well. Let's put that right here. Okay, and then we should be all set as far as the head info. So before we get into creating our form and all that, we're going to just start with the JavaScript. Just to make a request, we'll hard code the location and make sure that everything comes back okay. So let's go ahead and put in our script tag at the bottom. All right, and we're going to create a function here called Geocode. Okay, and I'm just calling it that. You can call it whatever you'd like. And then from here, we're going to make our request. All right, so we're going to use Axios. So since we included that script tag, we can just use Axios, and we can say .get. And then inside here is where we want to put the URL. So let's go and grab that, copy it, and we'll go back and let's paste in. Actually, you know what? We only want up to the question mark, because address and all that those are parameters. We just want this URL right here. Okay, and we're going to put that in right here. And then what we're going to do is have a second parameter, which will be an object of parameters. Okay, and it has to be in params like that. Okay, so this is going to take the actual address or location, and what I'm going to do is put in, let's see, how do I want to do this? Yeah, let's go inside the geocode function above the get request, and I'm just going to create a variable called location. And for now, we're going to hard code that. So let's just set it to, we'll say 22 Main Street, Boston, Mass. All right, and then inside address, we're just going to say location. And then we just want to also put our API key. So I'm going to grab that. Let's copy that. And we're going to put in key and then just paste that in. Okay. Now, what we want to do here is get rid of this semicolon and then just do dot then. Okay, and then this is going to take in a function that'll give us the response from that request. So we just want to pass in response, and then if there's an error, we can do dot catch. That'll take in a function as well that'll take in an error if there is one. Okay, and you can handle that how you want. I'm just going to console log it. Okay, and then for now, we're just going to console log our response to see what it gives us. Okay, now we just created the function, we haven't called it yet, so let's just go right above it and we'll say call geocode, and let's go ahead and save it, and then I'm going to just open up the application. Let me just bring that over. Okay, and I'm going to open up the console here with F12, and you can already see that we got an object back. So if we look at that, what we're going to be concerned with here is data. So inside data, we have the results. Now results is an array, and we're always going to get the first one, which is going to be at 0. And then inside there is where we have our address components, which is also an array. So you can see we have the, if we look in types, this is the street number. We get 22 back because it's 22 Main Street. This one here is the street name. You can see for types we have route. It's not actually called street name. And we have Charlestown, which is the neighborhood. Okay, so neighborhood or political. I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess Main Street is in Charlestown, which is kind of like a subset of Boston. And then in here, and you're not always going to get the neighborhood back because most places, small towns, they don't have specific neighborhoods like that. And then if we look down here, we get the formatted address. We get the geometry, which has the latitude and longitude, so we're getting what we need back. So let's go back to our application, and what I want to do is start to take that information and create some output so that we can put it into our web page. Alright, so in here inside the dot then is where we're going to be working. So let's just put a comment here, and we'll just say log, full response. And then underneath that, we're going to start to format things. So let's say format or formatted address. So we're going to grab that. Now, I'm just going to console log to make sure we can get it correctly. So what we'll do is take that response, and then remember we're going to look in data. We kind of want to look at the structure here. So data, results, the first one in that array, and then formatted address. Okay, so you need to kind of match that structure. So response, data, results, that's an array. We want the first one in there, and then we want the formatted address. Okay, so if we save that, it reloads and we get the exact formatted address. All right, now we want to output that onto the screen. So let's go ahead and, Jesus, I have so much stuff open here. Let's close that up. And then let's put that into a variable. So we'll say formatted address, set it to that. Okay, and then we're going to want to create the output to put in the web page. So I'm going to create another variable called formatted address output. And for that, now instead of using single quotes, we're going to use backticks, because this allows us to create a template string and we can use multiple lines. Now for each area, the formatted address, the address components, and the geometry, we're going to create a UL, a list group. All right, so in here, let's say UL, okay, and this is a Bootstrap class of list group. All right, and then inside here, we'll have our li tag, and that'll have a class of list group item. Okay, now the way that we can use variables inside a template string is with a money sign and then some curly braces, and all we want to put in here is that formatted address. All right, just like that. So we have the output. Now down here, we're going to actually output to app. Okay, so we want to create a div inside the body here to kind of be a placeholder for that. So let's say div, and I'm going to give it an ID of formatted dash address, and then tab. Okay, that's Emmet. That's how I could do that with the tab. And then down here, let's grab that with document dot get element by ID, and the ID is formatted address. Okay, and what I'll do here is just say at the end dot inner HTML, and then we'll set that to the formatted address output. Okay, simple as that. Let's save it and reload, and there it is. All right. Now remember, we're going to have a form later on that we can actually, put in what we want, but for now we're just taking this Boston address. So let's go back, and I just want to wrap a container around everything that pushes everything into the middle. Div class container, it's a Bootstrap class. We didn't have to use Bootstrap, but I figured I'd make it look decent. Alright, so if we reload, now it's pushed to the middle. So now we want to go to our address components and do the same thing, which is a little different because address components is an actual array. This was just a single object that we could output. With the array, we're going to have to loop through the components and then output each one. So it's going to be a little different. So we'll go right here and let's say address components. So we'll create a variable here called address components, and we're going to set that to response data results 0 dot address components. All right, and again, if we look at the complete response, we're getting data results 0 address components, which is an array. So what we want to do here is we're going to loop through it, and then we're going to add each component to a list item. So let's start out by creating a variable called address components output, and we're going to set that off by being just a UL with the class of list group. Okay, and then we want to loop through each one, so we're going to use a for loop, which takes in a variable. So variable I, we're going to set that initially to 0. Then we're going to say as long as I is less than address components dot length, and then we're just going to increment by 1. Okay, and then for each one, we're going to want to add to this output variable. So we'll say address components output, and we want to append to this. Okay, we don't want to replace this UL, we want to add to it, so we can do that with plus equals. Now I'm going to use a template string here because I want to do multiple lines, so I used backticks. Alright, I didn't use backticks here, I used single quotes because it's only on one line and we're not inserting any variables into it. So for this, we'll have an li with a class of list group item, And then in here, what do we want? We want, first of all, the type. I'm going to use that as kind of the title of it, of each one. So for that, let's do our variable, and we can say address components, and we want whatever the current iteration is. So we want to use I right here, which is going to represent whatever one of these we're on. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay, and then we want to get the types, so dot types. Now remember, types is an array. If we look at it right here, types is an array, and we want the first one. So we're going to say we need that 0. So right here, let's put in brackets and then 0. So that'll give us the types, and I want that to be inside of a strong tag to make that bold. All right, and then we'll put a colon here, and then we want the actual value. Now you can use long name or short name. I'm going to use long name. So we should be able to do address components, whatever the current iteration is, and then we want full name. Okay, that should work. Long name, sorry, not full name. So long name. Then we also want the closing UL. So we're going to go outside of this loop, and then address components output, and we want to plus equal onto that just a closing UL. All right, and that's the full output. So now we just need to create a div up here, just like we did for the formatted address. So it'll be a div with the ID of address dash components tab. And down here, we're going to do the same thing. Just grab that. Document.getElementById. It's going to be address components. Inner HTML will be address components output. Okay, let's save that and go back. Cannot read property length of undefined. So let's see. It's talking about right here. Address components length. What did I do wrong here? Oh, I used camel case right here. The response is actually address underscore components. So it didn't know what that was. So let's go ahead and save that. And there we go. So now we have this UL with all that stuff. We have the type as the kind of the key, I guess, and then the value as the value. All right. And no matter what, it's going to, even if there's no, for instance, if there's no neighborhood, if we just put Boston, Mass, if there's no neighborhood, it's just not going to show up here, okay? Because it's looping through and it's only going to output what it finds. So let's go back and let's see. You know what I want to do is just wrap each one of these, each section, the formatted address, the components. I want to put those inside of a card, which is just a Bootstrap element. All right, so up here where we have our divs, let's just add on to that a class called card block, okay, which is kind of like a well in Bootstrap 3. Save that. And then it just kind of separates them. So now the last thing we want down here is the geometry, the latitude and longitude. So let's go back, and we might as well just add that div here now. So this will be ID geometry, and then we'll go down just like we did right here. I'll actually just copy this, and then this will be geometry, and let's see, what did I set that variable as? So we're going to grab the latitude and the longitude, so we'll say var lat, and remember that's going to be in .geometry, and just to show you, data results 0, geometry, location, and then we have lat and long. Okay, so that's what we're grabbing. So geometry.location.lat. Okay, and then we'll grab the longitude, change that to LNG, and change that to LNG. And then this is going to be geometry output, and then it's going to be a UL, but I do want two LIs, one for the latitude, one for the longitude, and I'm just going to add in a label for them both. So strong latitude. Okay, and then this right here, we'll just put in the lat variable, and then we'll copy that, and then this one will be longitude, and that'll be the LNG. Okay, and then we need to output it like we did the rest of these. So that'll be geometry, and then we're going to output the geometry output variable. So let's save that, and now we have latitude and longitude. So we're grabbing all of the address info and we're outputting it. Now if I were to change the location that we're looking at, let's change it to just the word Boston, and it'll still get us some stuff. So if we save it, and you'll see it gets the city name, it gets the county, the state, the country, and the latitude and longitude. All right, now just imagine what we did in the last video with the Google Maps. Remember, we had to put in the latitude and longitude to put a marker on the map. So we could make it so that we could just add a simple city name and then get the latitude and longitude and put that into our Google Map application and mark it on the screen. Okay, which is kind of cool, and might be something that I'll look into doing. All right, now let's make it so that we can actually change this inside of a form. So we're going to go and go up here, and we're going to create, let me just look at the HTML here. So we're going to put in, first of all, an H2, and I'm going to give that an ID of text-center because I want it centered on the screen. And we're going to say enter location. All right, and then under that, we're going to have a form, and we're going to give that an ID of location form. No action though. Okay, and then in here we're going to have an input. So I'm going to do input. We're going to give that an ID of, what did I put? Location input. Okay, so type text, ID, location input. Let's also put a class in here, and we're going to give it a Bootstrap class of form control, and then also form control -lg. And then we just need our button. So I'm going to put a line break, and then we'll put in our button, and let's give that button an ID. Let's see, an ID. Actually, it doesn't need an ID. So let's just say submit. Okay, we're going to give it a type of submit, and we're also going to give it a class of btn primary, which is a Bootstrap class, and btn block, which will make it a block level element so that it stretches all the way across. All right, so let's take a look at that. So that's good. Let's see. So now what we want to do is basically create an event for when we submit this form. Okay, and we're just using plain JavaScript. I'm not going to use jQuery or anything. I don't want to bloat this up. So let's go to let's see, down to our JavaScript, and we don't want to run Geocode right away because we want to be able to submit the form and then run it. So I'm going to comment that out for now, or for good actually. And then let's say get location form. So for that we can do, let's create a variable called location form and set it to document dot get element by ID, and it has an ID of location form. Now what we want to do is we want to listen for a submission. So let's say listen for submit. We're going to take that location form and we're going to add an event listener to it. All right, and the event we want to listen for is a submit event. Okay, now when that's submitted, we want to run the geocode function. Okay, now if I save that and we go and submit, you'll see it kind of just blinks. And the reason for that is because when you submit a form, it actually tries to submit it to a web page, and we don't want that. We want to kind of catch the submission first. So to do that, we can pass in an event parameter to geocode, and then we can, let's say, prevent actual submit, and we can just do e.prevent default. Okay, so let's save that, and now when we click submit, it works. Now it's always getting Boston, so we want to change that. So what we'll do is we're going to catch what's submitted in that input box. Okay, so instead of setting this just to a string called Boston, we're going to set it to document.getElement by ID. And remember that input has an ID of location-input. Now, if you want to get an actual value from an input field, then you want to do .value, or else it's just going to get you the input tag. So let's go ahead and save that now and go back, and let's enter, we'll say Methuen MA. So Methuen Mass, submit, and there we go. So it gives us all kinds of information: the city name, the county, the state, latitude and longitude. Let's say we want 10 School Street, Amesbury, Mass. Submit, and it gives us all of that info. So the street name, street number, gives us the postcode. Even though we didn't enter that in here, it's still going to give us that address info. So it's an excellent way to format an address. If you have someone at your website or your application and you want them to enter their address, there's no telling what they're going to do. They could leave off the zip code, they could leave off the state, anything like that, and this makes it so that it actually formats it correctly and puts it into your database, for example. So that's another reason to use Geocode. It's not just to get the latitude and longitude from an address, although that is that's the main use for it. Alright, so I hope you guys like this project, and we might do something later on where we combine this with the map application that we built, or maybe you could look at it as kind of like homework and do it yourself and try to figure it out. Alright, so thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe if you're not. Please follow me on social media, and I will see you in the next video.